Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about how to follow a vegan ketogenic diet. We chose to cover this topic because really the vegan movement is growing strong, and I don't think it's just a vegan movement. I think overall we're waking up and we're returning to an overall emphasis on whole foods, things that occur naturally in our world, and not and really just getting away from a lot of these processed foods that we're realizing cause a lot of health problems. So if you're somebody who follows a vegan or a plant-based diet and you are interested in a ketogenic diet, you may have done a Google search or looked on YouTube for some information on this, and there's just really not very much good information. And there's some people saying it can't be done, some people saying it shouldn't be done, but I'm here to tell you it can be done, and it can be very beneficial if you do it right. So my goal for this video today is to give you guys a foundation to start with, so that you can plan and succeed in your own vegan ketogenic diet. So first of all, I just want to introduce myself. You may have noticed I don't sound like Dr. Jockers, and that's because my name is Michael Dugan. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I'm a contributing writer and researcher and health coach with drjockers.com. So just a little glimpse into my life. You know, here's a picture of me in the mountains. That's my element. I love the mountains. I just love nature in general. Here's a little quick snip of, a little quick snip of a kind of exercise that I do. It's called functional patterns. If you're somebody in the fitness field, you're somebody who experiences a lot of pain in your body, I definitely recommend checking this out. This is something else I'm super passionate about because I see the life-changing potential it has in people's lives. And then on top of those things, I really like to just experiment with my physiology, see ways that I can take my physical and mental performance to the next level. And so you see things like this up in the top right corner. These are actually near infrared light bulbs. There are things like infrared saunas and whatnot, but those are relatively expensive. This little light setup I have is about $100, and that's something I've been testing out. So anyways, near infrared light has a bunch of benefits. So I just like, experimenting with myself with things like that. And then and here in the bottom right, it's a picture of me and my brother, his wife, and my partner as well. So let's get into it. First of all, how does ketosis work? So basically what it is you're training your body to burn fat instead of sugar for energy. So why would you want to do that? There's actually a ton of benefits, right? So when you think about how it works at a metabolic level, when you consume sugar, you have a spike in insulin that occurs in order to feed that sugar into your cells for energy. And so the thing with that is insulin actually influences a lot of other processes in the body, right? When the insulin's high or it's elevated, it signals the retention of certain minerals and water. If it's high long enough, it can increase inflammation in the body. It can throw off other hormones. And if you're consuming a lot of fast digesting carbs or processed foods, you're going to have very sharp rises and falls in blood sugar throughout the day. And that's what happens. That's where you get these things like being hangry, like the infamous hangriness that people get. If you have this sudden sensation, you get really hungry, you need to eat now. That's because you had a massive blood sugar spike, insulin threw all that sugar into your cells, and you had a rapid drop below a baseline level, and your brain perceives that as a threat. And so it says, okay, we need sugar now or we're going to die. And so you kind of rely, your life is very based around food because you have these frequent fluctuations that create that response in your brain. So on a ketogenic diet, however, when your blood sugar falls, your insulin levels fall. And instead, if you're eating enough fats, your body will start breaking fats down in your liver into ketones, right? And ketones are actually able to enter directly into the cell without a mediator like insulin. And they provide a higher amount of energy per molecule than sugar, while also producing less oxidative stress in the mitochondria, because that's where most of our energy is produced. So it's essentially a cleaner burning fuel, and it provides more energy. And this has a lot of benefits. So first of all, how do you get into this state? You need to really lower your carb intake, right? You need to get your body to the point where it realizes that carbs and sugar are not in abundance, and it has to convert its metabolism to burning fats, right? That's its next preference. And so what you need to do is increase your fat intake 60 to 80%. And I know for a lot of you, this may seem, against what you've heard. I know in the vegan and plant-based diet realm, it's very common to do more of a high carb, low fat, because saturated fats and cholesterol and that kind of thing have been kind of demonized. But really recent research is showing that we actually need healthy fats. We actually need some form of cholesterol, whether it's dietary or manufactured in the body from other nutrients. And a high fat, low carb diet has been shown several times to be superior in metabolic disorders and lowering inflammatory markers in the body. And so this is how you get into that state: 60 to 80% fats, 5 to 10% carbs, so very low amounts of carbs, and then a moderate amount of protein, so 20 to 30%. And so that's going to vary depending on your body weight, your activity levels and whatnot. And we'll go into some of these things a little bit more moving on. So first of all, some of the benefits, a lot of these tie into each other, right? So reduced inflammation, first of all, is probably one of the most foundational benefits of a ketogenic diet, right? Like I said, you have that stable blood sugar, you have that lower insulin level, it lowers inflammation, and on top of that, ketones don't produce as much oxidative stress at the mitochondrial level, which also results in less inflammation, which is going to be really helpful if you're dealing with some kind of disorder that has chronic inflammation at its root. And this is actually a surprising amount of health challenges or diseases. So next, of course, naturally you have improved fat burning. So you train your body to burn fat instead of sugar. Obviously, you're burning more fat than you were before. But if you combine that, right, if you're somebody who has a lot of excess body fat to burn, that's going to be another benefit for you. You're going to be able to burn that off much more quickly, especially if you combine it with things like intermittent fasting. And so, obviously obesity is considered a risk factor for a lot of diseases, just like inflammation. So that's another benefit. You get rid of that body fat and your health overall is just boosted tremendously. So next we have mental clarity and sharpness. And that's because basically since you're burning a cleaner source of energy, you're producing more energy as well. You'll notice improvements in areas that have a high mitochondrial density. And so areas of the body that have a lot of mitochondria are your brain, your heart. If you're a woman, it's your ovaries. Ovaries have the highest number of mitochondria out of any body part and any gender. It's pretty incredible. And then the liver has a lot of mitochondria as well. And then things like muscles and stuff are next up. So you'll notice improvements in these areas when you start to become very efficient at burning fat, such as when you are a few weeks into a ketogenic diet. Mental clarity and sharpness comes from basically you have an upregulation of mitochondria in the brain, you have lower inflammation, which is a big risk factor for a lot of neurological conditions, or even things just like brain fog and anxiety. So yeah, you get that mental benefit, which is huge for a lot of people, especially if they're using a ketogenic diet to improve mental performance, or if they have a neurological condition. So next you have abundant energy, and this is pretty straightforward, right? You get more energy from ketones than sugar, and it's more stable, and you have less inflammation. So like I said, all these things tie back into each other. Clearer skin. This is another benefit of reduced inflammation. A lot of skin issues are rooted in autoimmunity, and autoimmunity is largely rooted in inflammation. So obviously, that taking that together, a lot of times you see a lot of improvements in skin health. Sometimes there is an initial reaction that people experience. They have rashes and whatnot, and that's because a ketogenic diet has a mild detox effect. That's because we store toxins in our fat a lot of times. Next, we got reduced cravings, and that's just, right, I talked about blood sugar fluctuations and how that leads to cravings. So when you're burning fat, you just simply don't get those as often. You might get them if you go too long without eating, but it's substantially reduced. And this is something that is reported very frequently, is that once from people, when they decide to adopt a ketogenic diet, they say they hardly think about food in between meals anymore. They don't snack, they don't crave sugar. So that's a big thing. And then these next three, mitochondrial biogenesis, right? The ketogenic diet acts as a moderate stressor on the mitochondria, especially in the adaptation phase, when your cells are relearning how to burn fat. It actually helps get rid of old and weak mitochondria and stimulates the formation of new and stronger ones. You take all that together, right? You have, first of all, a more efficient energy source, less inflammation, and then you have more mitochondria. So you're producing more energy, which gives your body so much more raw material to do any function in the body. So that improves your ability to heal. It's going to really improve your ability to adapt to stress, a whole lot of benefits there. And then obviously, as a result of those benefits I was just talking about, you have anti-aging effects and reduced risk of a lot of chronic diseases, if not all of them. So who is this diet for, right? This is specifically geared towards vegans and those following plant-based diets. So if you're facing health struggles, especially ones that are rooted in chronic inflammation or metabolic disorders, so like diabetes, obesity, and that's type 2 diabetes, things like cancer, autoimmunity, all these things are metabolic or inflammatory conditions. And so those things can really benefit. And then things like neurological conditions, those are heavily inflammation as a result of inflammation. So that's things like mood disorders, anxiety, depression, brain fog, and then even neurodegenerative disorders, potentially like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, right? I'm just saying that being in a ketogenic state could potentially improve the body's ability to attack some things like this, or to mitigate some of the side effects. And then finally, I touched on this briefly, but your body stores a lot of toxins in your fats, especially things like xenoestrogens, things you pick up from the environment that throw off your hormones. And so your body stores them in your fats. And so when you get into a ketogenic state and you start burning off those fats, you have actually like a detox in that sense. So that can be very useful as well. So just looking at the potential benefits of a vegan diet, you have things like I was talking about before, like metabolic improvements, so weight loss, reduced risk of diabetes, reduced risk of heart disease. That's just because heart disease is largely rooted in inflammation, which I see is heavily influenced by blood sugar balance. And then you have increased fiber intake, so that's going to obviously improve the health of the microbiome. It's going to feed those beneficial bacteria in the gut, which has a heavy influence over the brain and the immune system. And it's going to help just make sure you're having healthy bowel movements. And then increased intake of beneficial dietary enzymes. So a lot of natural foods actually contain, especially plant foods, in their raw form, contain a lot of enzymes that are beneficial for digestion, beneficial for the body. And of course, this is going to be influenced by how much you cook your foods. If you ferment them, fermenting can improve those enzymes, cooking can lessen them. So that's something to keep in mind. And then this one, we're not completely sure. There's two sides of the argument on this one, that it could potentially have a lower environmental impact. However, there's also the idea that raising livestock in a humane manner, allowing them to churn the land naturally, essentially restoring nutrients to the soil, especially in over-farmed lands, is a great way to restore balance to our ecosystem. So there's two ways to look at it, but it could potentially have a lower environmental impact as well. And then just some health risks. Before I get into these, basically I just want to say that these are not end all be alls. These can be easily mitigated. You just have to plan well, right? So I'm bringing these into your awareness that so that you can address them moving forward, increase your chances of success, and reduce your chances that you're going to face any additional health challenges as a result of these things. So in general, most plant-based and vegan foods, especially good sources of protein, are high in starches, low in fats. So naturally you have a low fat intake and a low amount of fat soluble nutrient intake, like things like grass-fed butter contain obviously lots of saturated fats, but they also contain fat soluble vitamins like vitamins A, D, and K. And those are pretty important for health. Now, these things can be gotten from other foods, right? You can get the vitamin A precursors from orange vegetables. You can get vitamin D from the sun. That's the most ideal. You can also get it from mushrooms, right? If to get an optimal levels, you want to get sun, obviously. And then vitamin K can come from certain fermented foods. So just things to keep in mind. Next, people tend to have a naturally lower protein intake. And that's because a lot of these grains, a lot of these legumes contain things like, and then iron and zinc, this thing below it as well. A lot of these foods contain phytates and lectins, which, if you think about the biological role of a seed or a nut or a grain, right? Their biological role is to become planted and to grow and to propagate the species, right? To grow into the next generation of that plant or that whatever it may be. And so it's designed to resist, it has built-in survival mechanisms, right? It's designed to resist digestion so that animals eat them and then they get pooped out somewhere else and they can grow into a new plant. So these things, if you eat them in high amounts, can be very irritating to the gut lining, because that's their job, is to resist digestion. So it can be inflammatory to the gut and eventually lead to things like leaky gut, and it can even pull certain nutrients or inhibit the absorption of certain nutrients like minerals and proteins. So next you got B12. B12 is naturally occurring in mostly animal foods. It's also naturally occurring in a couple of vegan foods. I think things like algae, certain types of algae have a decent amount of B12 in them. Next, we have increased carbohydrate intake, which is a natural, like I said, a lot of the protein sources on a vegan diet are high in starches, high in carbs, low in fats. So you get that blood sugar issue that I was talking about in the second slide or third slide. And then I touched on this already, phytic acids and lectins, which can be inflammatory to the gut, leading to things like leaky gut. And if that goes on too long, you create systemic inflammation, things like autoimmunity. It's just really stressful on the body. Finally, you have a negligible intake of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. So most people get these from fish. However, we're finding that they originally came from things like algae, but there is a difference in the actual structure, the conformation of the structure, where if it's derived from a fish source versus a algae source, and there's a potential that they actually act differently in the body, and the fish sourced conformation is actually more beneficial. However, I have found, I've been doing some research and I found a really good alternative for vegans and those following plant-based diets to mitigate this. It's a brand called MitoLife. They make a purely algae-based omega-3 that has the same conformation as these long-chain fatty acids found in fish. And it's relatively inexpensive for what it is. It's a very potent supplement. And so actually I put a link to that in the description. It's called MitoLife, and it's an algae-based omega-3 supplement. So that's something that's really important. All these things can be mitigated, and especially a lot of these things will be mitigated if you're following a ketogenic style of diet, right? The carbohydrate intake issue. And then a lot of the phytic acids and lectins will be removed from the diet because those are the things that are higher in starches and carbs. And then obviously supplementing with B12, possibly using a plant-based protein powder, and then using an algae-based omega-3. So this is really what the diet will look like. If you've looked into a vegan ketogenic diet, you may have noticed it's somewhat restrictive, right? So that's something that you have to come to terms with. A plant-based diet is very abundant in plant foods, but like I said, a lot of those protein sources are high in starches and carbs. So when you look into doing a ketogenic version of a vegan diet, you really narrow down those food choices. And so if you're using it for therapeutic purposes, it can definitely be done. And this is what it would really look like. So basically, obviously, you want to start at the base of your pyramid. The foods you want to eat in the highest abundance are things that are high in healthy fats. So that's like avocados, avocado oil, olives and olive oil, coconut products, coconut butter, oil, full fat coconut milk in the can. You can also do coconut milk in the carton. Just watch out for added sugars. And then if you're using that a lot, you might want to add some coconut oil or some extra fats to that, because the coconut milk in the carton tends to be really low in fat. And then coconut flakes are really good. And they're now making really good yogurt alternatives using coconut products like kefir and yogurt. And so those can be really beneficial. And those are something else you need to look out for added sugar, because yogurt is like notoriously, any flavored yogurt is notoriously high in sugar. So something you could do with that is just add, a dropper of chocolate stevia to a plain coconut yogurt, and there you go. It's a nice alternative. So anyways, next you have raw cacao and dark chocolate. Many people don't think about this as a source of fat, but it's actually very high in healthy fats, as well as polyphenols, antioxidants, things that are great for lowering inflammation even further. So next up, after getting your healthy fats, you really want to focus on foods that have a high antioxidant content, especially if you're using this for overall health or for a certain health condition, because antioxidants are basically going to take those ketogenic benefits to the next level, right? It's going to amplify the anti-inflammatory benefits. It's going to amplify the energy production benefits. And it's really just going to provide your body with a ton of healing building blocks. So that's things like non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, things like asparagus. Those are all really great. And then next, low glycemic fruit in small amounts, like berries are probably the best in terms of their nutrient density, right? They contain lots of anthocyanins. Those purple pigments, especially blueberries, are super powerful for the brain, for the gut, and just for the body in general. Obviously, doing those in small amounts can be really helpful. And then citrus fruits are great. Obviously, no sugar in those, or very low amounts of sugar. Those can be used on foods, in water, and just in a lot of recipes. And then finally, herbs. Herbs are a big one. You want to use tons of herbs, especially like Italian herbs and some of these Middle Eastern herbs. So, rosemary, oregano, thyme, basil, turmeric, cumin, cardamom. These things are, first of all, loaded with antioxidants. They're super anti-inflammatory, and a lot of them also act as carminatives to improve digestion. So especially if you're all of a sudden eating a lot more fats, you might need those additional carminative benefits to help improve your digestion. And so that can be really powerful. And they're also great for anti-inflammatories for the gut as well. So next up, you have bioavailable proteins, right? Protein in moderate amounts. You probably want to shoot for, well, actually, we're going to talk more specific about proteins in a second. But some great sources, right? If you're going to use whole foods, it's going to be sprouted nuts, sprouted seeds, like sprouted pumpkin seeds are amazing. Hemp seeds can be really good. Macadamias. And then even tempeh can be really good, right? Because we don't really advocate for the consumption of non-fermented soy products. There's a lot of controversy around soy, but there's potential for estrogenic effects, and it's just not super easy to digest. So going for more, let's say, fermented forms of soy like tempeh or natto can actually be pretty beneficial. And tempeh is actually it's low in carbs, high in protein. It has a pretty neutral taste, so you can really season it however you want, a variety of ways you can make it. And then, so next up, you have protein powders, right? This is big. We actually, especially during the day, we advocate for doing liquid nutrition, especially if you're really trying to improve the healing capacity of the body, improve performance overall. Doing liquid nutrition during the day is less stressful on the body because digestion is actually a pretty energy intensive process. So doing smoothies can be really helpful here. So doing like a good pea protein and a hemp protein. We have a couple of versions of this. One of them is a little bit higher in carbs, our super digest protein, but our gut healing protein is actually super powerful. Has a good amount of protein in there. It's got tons of anti-inflammatory nutrients. It actually contains essentially an entire multivitamin, lots of B12 and these minerals that we talked about that are often deficient on a vegan diet. And it also includes a liver detox complex in there as well. So it's a super comprehensive supplement. And that's something that we will typically recommend to vegans or those on plant-based diets for doing liquid nutrition throughout the day. So yeah, that's called gut healing protein. There's a link to that in the description as well. So after fats, antioxidants, and proteins, those are all really important. You have fiber. So that's just really going to feed the gut microbiome, make sure you're moving your bowels. And moving your bowels is actually an overlooked concept when it comes to a ketogenic diet. There are certain stressors in the body that can pull you out of ketosis. Because when you have a cortisol spike, right, that's your body's response to stress. Cortisol's job is actually to put sugar in the blood for immediate energy, because sugar is a really quick source of energy. And so anytime you have a stress response, it has the potential to pull you out of that ketogenic state. And so constipation and microbial overgrowth, which can occur with constipation, or just infrequent bowel movements, can create that kind of recurring stress response in the body. So keeping the bowels moving is really important. And then obviously fiber is going to feed the healthy bacteria as well. So doing things like shirataki noodles, which is basically just like a fibrous noodle, and then doing nuts and seeds can be really big too. And then obviously leafy green vegetables and Brussels sprouts and asparagus and those kinds of vegetables are really good for that as well. Next up, we got small amounts of fermented foods and natural sweeteners. Fermented foods are further going to feed the healthy gut bacteria, improve digestion. You have a little bit of like a small pickle or a small amount of kimchi before a meal or even with your meal is really, really big. And then a lot of people think that they can't enjoy sweet foods on a ketogenic diet, but you can. You just have to use like a natural sweetener that's non-caloric, non-insulinogenic. So things like stevia, monk fruit, and then some people can tolerate sugar alcohols. If you decide to use a sugar alcohol, just be wary of any digestive side effects that occur, like bloating and gas are pretty common. But when you're looking for stevia and monk fruit, look for a form that's not mixed with things like dextrose or other compounds, right? A lot of these companies are kind of deceptive, trying to basically capitalize on this trend. Look for a pure stevia or a pure monk fruit without any other added sweeteners. So when it comes down to it, there are going to be certain foods that are going to be staples on the diet, and so these are things even are staples for me on a daily basis. I don't necessarily follow a vegan or a plant-based diet. I have a heavy emphasis on plant-based foods, and these are some of them, right? Especially on a ketogenic diet, these are big. So avocados, first of all, contain lots of healthy fats. They contain magnesium, potassium, two minerals that people tend to excrete fairly quickly on a ketogenic diet. So a good source of those electrolytes, contains lots of vitamins and minerals. And so avocados just have a really great package of nutrients. And so I would say even eating 2 to 3 of these a day can be huge. They're super, and they also contain a lot of fiber. Those are a great fiber source to just keep the bowels moving, and a low sugar fiber source that won't be feeding any unwanted bacteria. And so next you have olives. Olives are great on salads, even just as a snack. They tend to be salty, so that's a good source of sodium. And then they contain actually some pretty beneficial antioxidants in there as well as healthy fats. So olives and olive oil drizzled on salads and things like that can be really big. Next, coconut products of all kinds. This is probably the most used staple in my diet, and something I would really recommend you using a lot of in your diet as well, because it's naturally high in fats, healthy saturated fats, and it even has those naturally occurring MCTs that are going to improve your ability to make ketones as an energy source. So things like coconut oil, coconut butter. The difference between those, by the way, coconut butter contains the full puree of the coconut meat and the internal contents, whereas coconut oil is just the oils extracted from that meat. Coconut butter also tends to have a lot of fiber in it as well. And then the coconut flakes are great for a snack to go in smoothies, on salads. And then full fat coconut milk is probably what I use the most to make smoothies and shakes during the day. And it can even be a great base for certain soups and stews. So, and then even MCT oils that are derived from coconut products. We actually carry one that I would consider one of the better ones on the market. Basically, an MCT oil is like I said, it improves your ability to make ketones. And MCTs are naturally occurring in coconut products in small amounts. But basically, companies are taking that and concentrating it and it acts as a very bioavailable source of ketones. The body is able to convert it into energy very quickly without a whole lot of digestion or anything like that. And so when you're looking for a product that's marketed as an MCT oil, you want to look for if it showcases its MCT makeup, right? So there's actually 4 MCTs that are determined by their length on a molecular structure. You don't need to know that, but basically there's 4 of them. One of them, it's called lauric acid, doesn't really act like an MCT. It's not converted into ketones very easily. And so you want to make sure that an MCT oil that you buy does not contain lauric acid. And so you want one that focuses more on capric and caprylic acids. So that's C8 and C10. Those are the 2 that are most easily converted into ketones while also being very tolerable to the gut. And so we actually carry one that we consider one of the best. It's the Bulletproof brand. And so that link is also in the description. I'm just trying to make this stuff really accessible to you guys. So that can be a powerful strategy for getting into an optimal state of ketosis, is using those MCT oils. So next you got non-starchy vegetables. And I talked about these, and then sprouted nuts and seeds are big as well. Just look out for nuts and seeds that are higher in carbs. Things like pumpkin seeds and macadamias can be really good. And even things like walnuts, especially. So let's look at daily protein requirements. This is going to depend on your body weight, your activity level, and really what your therapeutic goal is. So first of all, if you're a sedentary individual, you're going to want to shoot for 0.5 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So to get your body weight in kilograms, you just divide your body weight in pounds by 2.2. That'll give your body weight in kilograms, and you multiply it by 0.5 to 1 to get your total requirements for the day. It'll probably be around 20 to 40 maybe grams of protein per meal if you're eating 2 to 3 meals a day. And if you're somebody who is active, you're trying to build muscle, you're going to want to bump that up to 1 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And obviously, on more days that you're more active, you want to be, you'll probably want to be more to the higher range of that. On your rest days, you want to be on the lower range of that. That can be really beneficial. And then finally, if you're somebody who's using a ketogenic diet to really and boost your body's ability to battle cancer, you want to lower your protein intake, or you would want to consider lowering your protein intake, because your protein intake actually has an influence over modulating a pathway in your body called mTOR. That's your mammalian target of rapamycin. And having chronically elevated mTOR is going to facilitate it could potentially facilitate the growth of new cancer cells. And by lowering your protein intake, you can actually help modulate that pathway and potentially lower the tendency of your body to contribute to that growth of cancer. And in addition to the other benefits of following a ketogenic diet, right, because we know cancer cells are very reliant on sugar as an energy source, those two together can be very beneficial for basically putting cancer cells at a disadvantage in your body. So next, just a strategy I want to recommend if you're doing this for therapeutic purposes is you probably want to measure your ketone levels. There are various devices available to do this. And the two best ones are going to be blood measurement or breath measurement. And that's because basically blood measurement is the best one because it is the most accurate depiction of the ketones that your body is actually utilizing. Because your body will produce ketones and then your cells actually have to use them. And this is a learning process your body goes through when you first adopt a ketogenic diet. But taking a blood measurement is considered the gold standard. You can get one of these devices on Amazon, something like the Precision Extra with ketone strips, although that can be relatively expensive. So that's something that's a factor for a lot of people. So next up, you have breath testing. This seems to be a very good alternative. And it's much cheaper, right? You don't have that recurring expense of the ketone strips. It's a one-time purchase. So things like the Ketonics breath meter actually plugs directly into your computer, tells you your breath ketone levels. And then there's a new device coming out, or it just came out. It's called the Level, L-E-V-L. And it's a very good breath ketone device that can actually track your ketone levels over weeks of time, tell you your fat burning potential and all that good stuff. So that's a really good device as well. Other options are urine ketone strips. These are a little bit less accurate because you tend to pee off more ketones during the beginning stages of a ketogenic diet because you're not burning them at a cellular level. So if you were to use ketone strips, urine strips, I would say use them from day one of a ketogenic diet. And you want to look for actually a decrease in your urinary ketones over weeks of time. So maybe over 2 to 4 weeks of time, you want to look for a decrease in urinary ketone levels because that tells you that your body is actually using them. So you want to look for an initial increase to show that your body is actually producing them, and then a decrease over time to show that your cells are actually using those ketones as energy. Other things you can do is testing your blood glucose levels just to make sure they're remaining stable. And then especially after eating certain meals and after exercise, after stressful scenarios, to see if your body has spiked its blood sugar as a response to stress. So then you can monitor that way. And then finally, how you feel. A lot of people can tell when they enter into a deep ketogenic state or even a mild ketogenic state because they just feel like they have more energy. They get hungry less often. They have a clearer mental processes. And so, yeah, that's an important strategy, is monitoring your ketone levels, especially if you're doing this for therapeutic purposes. So next, another strategy is using MCT oils. I talked about this already, but basically they're derived from coconut. They can also be derived from palm oil, but coconut's a more sustainable source, so you want to look for that. And so MCT oils are very easily converted into ketones. So basically, if you're using that during the initial stages of a ketogenic diet, or even before you lower your carb intake and get yourself into a ketogenic diet, it can help get your body familiar with ketones and just assist that, or it can get your body familiar with higher amounts of ketones and then help facilitate that transition away from glucose metabolism into a more fat-burning metabolism. And then even when you're in ketosis, using MCT oils can help maintain that state and just provide a very clean-burning, bioavailable source of energy derived from ketones. So next, right, here's some recipe ideas. We're actually in the process of coming up with a whole new series of ketogenic vegan recipes on drdoctors.com. So if you want to be the first to find out about that, definitely sign up for our newsletter. Just follow our website. Those are in process right now. But here are some things to get you started. So basically, like I said, during the day, we recommend, or we really advocate for liquid nutrition. So in the morning for breakfast, doing something like a fat-burning coffee, a keto matcha green tea, or like a something called dandelion tea, doing a bulletproof dandelion tea, just depending on your caffeine preferences. But dandelion tea is caffeine-free. You got matcha, which is like the next step up with a little bit more caffeine. And then coffee, if you're just one of those coffee people that really loves their coffee. I'm one of those people as well. But we have 3 great recipes on the website. One's called turmeric fat-burning coffee. And then we have several variations of a fat-burning coffee. Some of them involve butter. You can easily replace that with coconut oil. And then we have a keto matcha green tea. That's a great one. And then this dandelion fat-burning coffee is a great one as well. That one's a caffeine-free. It's great for liver detox and just providing you with fats in the morning to get your day going. So for lunch, it's going to be more things like shakes and smoothies. Oops, sorry about that. So we have several smoothie recipes that use our gut healing protein, as I suggested, but you could also use another plant-based protein if you can find one that's very low in carbs. So we have several gut healing smoothies and shakes, and you can really experiment with this. If you can find a good chocolate protein, you could do like an avocado, some full-fat coconut milk, and some of that chocolate protein to make like a chocolate protein pudding. It's really delicious the way we make it. And so those are all great options. And then putting small handfuls of blueberries in there can be really powerful too. Up here, you'll see our avocado pesto, right? Many people don't think about putting avocado in a pesto, but this one's actually really delicious, and it's a great way to just load up on beneficial nutrients, right? So like a pesto, you put herbs in there, like Italian herbs, like oregano, basil, thyme, and you puree them in there with, like an avocado, maybe some kind of leafy green, and then even some MCT oil, and all together with some salt and pepper. Altogether, it's a raw food. It's nutrient dense, has healthy fats, a lot of those antioxidants we talked about with the herbs. So that can be really great. And you can just pour that over like something like zucchini noodles, shirataki noodles, put it on your tempeh, put it on your salads, whatever you want. It can be great, or even just eat it with a spoon. It's pretty good. And then finally, we have this curry recipe. Curries are a great way to just load up on nutrients, especially antioxidant-rich herbs, healthy fats. So doing like a coconut milk base, putting in lots of aromatic herbs, turmeric, cardamom, nutmeg, a little bit of cinnamon, garlic, onions, lots of vegetables, and something like tempeh or pumpkin seeds for protein source. And then finally, we have several ketogenic friendly dessert recipes that you can find. Things using like butter or eggs in the recipes can easily be swapped for coconut oil. And we also have an article on egg replacements, so you can use those in place of those for these recipes. And again, we are coming out with tons of new vegan ketogenic recipes, so be on the lookout for those as well in the future. So one thing I just want to give you guys just a brief, I just want to touch on briefly, is a lot of people experience what's called keto flu when they are on the initial phases of a ketogenic diet. And so these are things like hypoglycemia, constipation, diarrhea, frequent urination, all these things over here, things like flu-like symptoms, sugar cravings, and these are very common in the beginning stages of a ketogenic diet. And these occur due to three main reasons: hypoglycemia, HPA axis dysfunction, or what some would call adrenal fatigue, and then finally electrolyte imbalance. Just to touch on these briefly, hypoglycemia, because in the beginning stages of a ketogenic diet, your body first has to learn how to make ketones in higher amounts from fats that you're eating, and then your cells have to relearn how to burn those fats efficiently. So if you cut out carbs too quickly and then just put in a bunch of healthy fats, you're going to go through a phase of time, maybe a week or two, where you have low blood sugar and your body doesn't know how to use ketones yet. So a great way to mitigate this is to use MCT oils or exogenous ketones before you cut out carbs completely, or just lower your carb intake gradually over time. And then doing things like intermittent fasting and stuff like that can really help that transition phase. So that's one thing to consider. And then skipping down to electrolyte imbalance, when you, again, in the initial phases of a ketogenic diet, your insulin levels drop. And one of the functions of insulin is to retain sodium in the kidneys, which also tells the body to retain more water. So you go into a ketogenic state, your insulin levels drop, and you actually expel a lot more water and minerals, increasing your need for them. So that means don't be afraid to use a lot of salts, right? You need to be using the right salt, like a Celtic gray sea salt or a Himalayan salt, these naturally occurring salts that contain a whole array of minerals and not just sodium. Adding a pinch of salt to your water, salting your foods generously. Really don't be afraid of salt, especially if you're doing a ketogenic diet. You need a lot of it. So salt to taste. And so that can be big. Electrolyte imbalance can contribute to a lot of these problems. And then HPA axis dysfunction. If you're somebody who's experiencing a lot of symptoms of adrenal fatigue, or what would classically be called adrenal fatigue, then there's going to be some extra things you want to do before you go into a full ketogenic diet. Using MCTs and exogenous ketones will be good. Using adaptogenic herbs, especially before you reduce your carb intake entirely. And then there are some other strategies as well. So if you've been following a ketogenic diet for a while, and you're still just, your energy is not where it should be, you might want to increase your carb intake, and then work with a functional nutrition practitioner to essentially help your body get to that state where it can support a state of ketosis. So yeah, we have a whole article on this. It's called the most 11 common keto side effects, or something along those lines. So that's on drjockers.com. And so finally, we will also have another article. It's called 10 critical ketogenic diet tips that can be really helpful as well. We have tons of information on a ketogenic diet on our website, and we have a ketogenic program that actually sequences through a ketogenic diet, lifestyle strategies to improve your body's ability to heal. And then of course we have me, and we have two other nutrition practitioners that are available to work with. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you're facing any health challenges, I'm here for you. You can send me an email at michael@drjockers.com, and we can get on. I offer a free 10 to 15 minute call to cover your initial health concerns. And then from there, if you decide you want to go forward with a customized health plan or even a 6-month coaching plan, then we can do that as well. So anyways, I hope you guys found this video to be very informative, very helpful. And I hope that you are able to take this and have success in your vegan ketogenic journey. It's been a pleasure. My name is Michael Dugan. I'm a functional diagnostic nutritionist. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have, and have a great week, you guys.